everyone, welcome to Close Look. Kevin Atwell here with you today. We're in for a real treat. Standing next to me is world-renowned comedian Hollywood Harv. So let's take a close look. Hollywood, how are you doing?
Great, how are you? It's a beautiful sunshiny day. I like that you said world-renowned. It makes me sound a little better. Yeah.
It's the truth, and it is a gorgeous day. I have a sneaky suspicion that your mother did not write Hollywood Harv on your birth certificate.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't added till a little bit later. It is now on the birth certificate, though. Okay. We snuck it in there.
Cool. And what is your real name?
My name is Harv, and last name is Pooney. I don't know if I'm supposed to give that out. Is this some sort of security risk? But
good to know, Hollywood Harv. And why Hollywood?
You know what? It was actually, I don't even know where it just got given to me. I believe it's a mixture of my desire to be an entertainer and the movie Top Gun.
Yeah.
Right? So it was like I was in broadcast school and I disappeared for a week. I had a kind of a tendency to skip school a lot. Don't do that at home, kids. If you're going in school, stay in school. But I was gone for like a week and I came back and everyone was calling me Hollywood. They were like, oh, he's gone to Hollywood or whatever. Yeah. And it just stuck. And then I started on radio and that was kind of the name I went with.
Well, it's a great name. So it seems like you've been in the entertainment industry for quite some time. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And what did you study?
Grew up in Richmond, born and raised. I went to McNair, followed by, Kwantlen. I went to college there. Then I got into broadcasting, went to broadcast school, finished my broadcast school, and eventually started working on radio.
Cool. So when you were in college, were you taking broadcasting or were you taking something else?
No, I was totally different. I was doing like poli-sci and geology. Didn't know what I wanted to be, And eventually I decided, hey, entertainment, that's where I want to be. I went to broadcast school and from there it began.
Good for you for pursuing your passions and hobbies and interests. I'm sure you have much more. I have a question. I hate to stereotype, but it's quite common in the Indian community, let's just say, or in many other communities as well, that when you're in school, poli-sci, you're going to be a lawyer, and all of a sudden you're like, Mom, Dad, I want to stand up and tell jokes for a living. How did that go well with them back then, and how are they now?
Well, like anyone's parents, my parents had high hopes and dreams in the beginning, but eventually they started giving up. I started defeating them a little bit. Once their spirits were deflated and realized this guy ain't gonna be a doctor or a lawyer anytime soon. And they're like, all right, you wanna tell jokes? That's better than nothing, right? And eventually when they saw that I was doing well with it, they've supported me. Now they've come around, they fully support, they understand what I do, and they understand it's not something everyone can do, so they accept it. And now I'm like their son again, right?
Born again son.
Yeah.
That's great. You brought up a super good point about stand-up comedy not being something that everyone can do. At what point in your life, at what age did you feel as if you had a knack for it and that you wanted to pursue it fully?
I didn't realize that I wanted to fully pursue it till I was in my 20s. But you want to hear the full story? Yeah. All right, if you have the time. It actually, even back in elementary school, it was grade 6. And normally, it's grade 7's your top grade in grade 7, and they handle all your emceeing duties, dances, and whatnot. There's a school president that handles it. Well, I was in grade 6 and I was hosting the school dance. For some reason, I don't even remember how it worked out, but I ended up being the volunteer. And I was just like saying things and hosting the dance and like getting people to do stuff. And that's when like all the teachers came to me and they're like, damn, you're a natural at this. You should do this. And I never thought about it again until like grade 10. I started doing it more and more. I would be the host for all like regular dances. I would do like the morning announcements. It's kind of nerdy of me. I was on the yearbook committee and all that kind of stuff. And eventually I was the president of the class. And I just became used to speaking in public. Yeah. And then as I got older, people I knew would get married and they'd be like, oh, Harv, you know English and Punjabi. Why don't you host the wedding or MC the reception? And so I started doing that. And from that, it just grew and grew. And then, eventually with broadcasting, I started doing radio. I started doing voiceover for commercials, doing some television. And then it just snowballed into eventually I knew that I couldn't work with anyone. I'm terrible at working with people, but I could stand on the stage by myself and do my own thing. So eventually stand-up comedy was a natural progression.
Yeah. So in your endeavors to be a stand-up comedian, which you are today full-time, have you participated in shows? How many, and if so, how many have you been a part of?
If I had to put a number on it, it would be over 400. At this point, yeah. Okay. It's been a lot of shows. I mean, and it ranges from everything to just me being on stage doing stand-up to emceeing events, fundraisers, BC Liberal Party, BC Cancer Research, like everything. I've done. In the beginning, I was like, oh, here and there, I'd take a gig that I felt like I wanted to do, till eventually I was like, all right, you want to book me? Let's do it. Yeah. You know, and I just started doing everything. Bhangra competitions, concerts, Punjabi shows, English shows, whatever. I've done, you know, Chinese Canadian community, anything I get my hands on. If it involves a microphone and me, let's do it, you know?
Yeah, wonderful. And so I know being a stand-up comedian and just making people laugh in general isn't an easy thing. What are some of the difficulties that you faced, and what do you think are some of the difficulties associated with being a stand-up comedian? I guess the setbacks that you have to sort of overcome.
You gotta kind of just overcome initially, like when you're writing. That's the hardest part. Like for me, when I was on stage, I find it not so I find it easy, which I shouldn't say because it really isn't, but it's like therapeutic. You know, I'm on stage and I'm speaking to the masses, and like most people are more nervous when there's more people. I thrive off that. Like I like the more people there are, the more at ease I am, because I know at least somebody in this audience is gonna like what I'm saying, right? If there's enough people, I'll at least have 2 people who are like, hey, this guy was good, right? But it's the writing, because so many times I'll write a show and it's a lot of material. Like if I'm doing a 1-hour stand-up show, that's like 30 pages of written material that you have to memorize. But like usually you doubt yourself, and that's what beats you. Like you can defeat yourself just by when you write your material and you look at it and you're like, what am I talking about here? This is not funny. And you read it in the mirror and you're like, this sucks. I can't read this in front of an audience. But eventually you do it in front of a few people, you practice it, and you take the material you have and you polish it enough that eventually it becomes funny. Yeah. And it becomes good, and then you go out and do it. But you can't doubt it. Once you start doubting, then you just start rewriting, and after you've written a joke 5 different times, changed it, you realize your first joke was the best one.
So when it comes to an hour-long show, which you've done in the past, how many hours of work go into creating that 1-hour show?
Oh, it's a countless amount of hours. I can't even put a number on it. Usually, if you're doing an hour show, it's going to be 2 months of prep. Yeah, it's I would say in the first month I'll write a show, and I'll write an hour's worth of material, which is, like I said, about 30 pages typed. And you start memorizing that, you start practicing it in front of the mirror, and then usually in the second month, like 3 weeks before the show, you'll be like, oh my God, I can't say this. Then I'll destroy it, because if you have it there, you might look at it and it might influence your new show. So then you completely scrap that, write a new show, which takes about 2 weeks, and then you start memorizing that. So you can't even put a number on the amount of hours that goes into it. And it's like the joke doesn't actually, you might originally write a joke and you'll be like, okay, this is what I'm going with. But then you tell it once, and then the second time you tell it, you'll add to the punchline of another line. And then the third time, you might even, after you've even done this at like a smaller show to try it out, then you add another line to it. It's not until the 4th or 5th time you've told this in front of people that you actually get to the final joke. Because you always got to add to it and be like, okay, it's funny here, but then I take it to that next level, and then the next level, and then it becomes a polished joke that you can say on a stage in front of thousands of people.
Yeah. What are some of the misconceptions you feel people have when it comes to stand-up comedians and the industry of comedy?
People just assume that you just went out there. Like, this guy just got up on the stage and just started talking and he's funny. Or people assume that, oh, hey, my friend Randy's really funny. You should put him on your next show. Be like, really? Can your friend Randy stand in front of a microphone in front of 1,000 people and not get nervous? Like, there's stage presence, there's the way you handle the mic, the way you speak into the mic, the way you project towards the audience. There's so much other stuff than just being a funny guy, right? There's a lot of people who are funny amongst their friends, but it doesn't translate into a show. There's a lot of people who do funny YouTube videos, funny sketches, but when you're on that stage on a stand-up show, you're by yourself. You can't like lean on your buddy and be like, oh yeah, check out this guy and talking about him. You can't, like, within 50 feet of you, there is nothing. there might be a stool and you might be able to lean on that or do something with that stool, but other than that, you're by yourself. And if you get nervous and or like, you can't just run off, you can't just end it. So you have to just work your way through it.
Definitely. Can you think of a specific time when you've been performing? I mean, I'm sure that out of all those 400 shows, there had to have been one where you just felt like, oh crap, it was just a really crappy performance, and you felt really bad afterwards. How have you moved forward, and what are some positive words of advice you could provide to our viewers to let them know that, hey, keep going?
Well, for myself personally, I've been fortunate that so far I haven't yet been booed off the stage or got any tomatoes or eggs thrown at me. But it's like when I'm nervous, that's when I know I'm gonna be good. Like, no matter how many times I go up there, the butterflies, the nervousness, I'm almost like, I feel like I'm that close to a heart attack before I hit the stage. But it's like the days that you're not nervous, that you're like, oh, okay, I got this show, I'm prepared. That's when you find your performance is not as on point as it could be, because you're kind of overconfident. That's happened to me a couple times where, you know, I still pulled off the shows fine, but in my mind, mentally, I was like, you know what, I'm not fully satisfied with that. Fortunately, they were smaller, you know, private events, but it's like when I'm nervous, then I prepare even more and I over prepare because I'm so nervous. And then when you get out there, you're just bang, fully prepared, and you bang it out, and it's your nervousness that helps you get through it.
So if I were to pose the word inspiration to you, what could you say on that word?
Inspiration for me, comedy-wise, is just daily life. Everything, like daily stuff you go through, that it all depends on how you view it. If you're closed-minded and you're just driving about and going about your day, then you're not going to be inspired by these little events that happen. If you're open to it, you see things differently. You see like how ridiculous someone is being, and you're like, I can turn this into a joke because this is really absurd. Yeah. Normally you just honk and keep going, yeah. Right? But if you let yourself open yourself up, let yourself be inspired by these things, then you can turn that into a bit or a joke, as we call it, right? Yep. So those are the things. I mean, there's so many things that inspire me. There's so many different things that inspire me, but I try not to make other comedians, you know, people say, oh, I'm inspired by this comedian, or I'm a singer and I'm inspired by this singer. I find that the more comedy I watch, mentally you have that person's style or their joke or the way they deliver it. It's in your subconscious. When you start writing a joke, you realize, wait a minute, afterwards when you read it back, like, hey, Martin Lawrence did the same joke, right? Or whoever, right? So I try not to watch so that I could be myself. And that's my goal, to really be on stage, project who I am, and not something that I watched. Yeah. Right.
Very important. And is your family quite supportive? Do you have a strong support network around you?
Yeah, my family is very supportive. They've been really good. I mean, eventually, in the beginning, they were like, we don't understand what it is you're doing. It wasn't until like when other aunties start coming up to like my mom and stuff and saying, oh, we saw your son here, he's really good, then they start like getting a little, you know, wider and being like, oh yeah, you know, oh yeah, my son is great, right? And after that, when other people say, oh, your son is good, otherwise they're just always gonna be like, oh, well, Kuldeep's son has done a computer course and you should do something like that and maybe just get married, find a nice girl. Eventually they're like, oh, wait a minute, my son's doing good stuff too, right?
So are you married? Do you have children? If so, do you bring them to the shows? Is the content of your comedy child safe?
Definitely not. Definitely it's like 16 plus is what we call it. Okay. I do have a 2-year-old boy, and it's really changed my material. It's changed my outlook. You know, obviously it changes your whole life. Yeah. And I find in my show now, I'm always talking about like how ridiculous the stuff like the kids do and the stuff that we do in order to, like the stuff we do to play with our kids. You're no longer talking to your wife in the same way, you know, because you're used to talking to your kids. Your wife comes home and you're just like, hello, how are you? You know? Yeah, exactly. How was your day? And I'm like, what am I doing? Right? It's not my kid, but it changes everything. And so yeah, that's like been worked into my material. I try to stop it now, like, because now when I'm doing a show, I'm like, okay, I gotta stop. I can't just, you become one of those parents that just wants to talk about their kid all the time. So I try to tone it down, but it's hard not to. And I've done like, family shows where my kid has come with me, and my son, he's picked it up now. Like now at home, he'll go into my studio and grab my microphone, and he walks around with it, and he's just like talking like da 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 into the microphone. We're like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm Dada. I'm Dada. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what Dada does. Just yap into the microphone, right?
So I hear you have a show coming up here in Vancouver. So do you want to tell us a little about when it is, and where it is, and how much tickets are?
Yeah, it's a big show. I'm really pumped about it. It's we're taking on the Vogue Theatre on Granville Street, which is a really big venue, historic venue. It's been one of the oldest and most famous theaters in Vancouver. My show is Sunday, June the 3rd. I'll be headlining the show. I do a 1-hour set. It's being filmed for television. We're turning into like a big social event. There's an after party at the club across the road. We have opening comedians, some great opening comedians. My friend Zach will be the MC for it. There's Amy Baudouin. She does a TV show called Caution May Contain Nuts. She's a sketch comedian, and so she'll be doing stand-up there. I got another guy named Steve McGowan, who's at Laugh Lines usually. He will be one of the opening acts, and it'll be a really fun event. We're already halfway through. We've sold out half the venue already. We got 3 weeks to go, probably 2 weeks by the time this show airs. So it's Sunday, June the 3rd. Tickets are available at northerntickets.com. Make sure you come out, all the viewers of Close Look. I mean, you'll have a good time. We'll make you laugh. I don't recommend bringing your grandma or your 13-year-old kid there. Probably not. But yeah, it'll be a good time.
And do you have a website if people wanted to get in touch with you, if they ever wanted to hire you for a private event or something like that?
That is good. I was going to give myself some cheap plugs, but now you're doing it for me. My website is actually hollywoodharvcomedy.com. And my email is hollywoodharvcomedy@gmail.com. You can get in touch with me, or like I said, go to northerntickets.com, or go to my website and you can click buy tickets. The show will be a great time. It's a very mixed audience. It's going to be a really fun social atmosphere. It's diverse, not just Punjabi crowd. And because I know there's always the Punjabis that will be like, oh, if it's in Surrey, I'll go. I don't want to drive to downtown. But, you know, it's worth the drive, and you will have a good time.
Okay. Cool. Looking forward to it. And on a final note, a positive message, some words of advice for our viewers out there who are aspiring comedians to let them know that they can be where you are today. A comedian that not only performs locally, but also travels overseas and is quite successful.
You know what? Words of advice for the youth. Stick with it. Practice your craft. I mean, if you go out there and you bomb the first time, don't give up. I mean, you're going to go up. You might try like 50, 60 times and then be like, you know what, this is not working for me. Don't. Try it 150, 200 times, and then decide if this is for you or not, because everyone gets knocked down a million times, especially in this industry, in the comedy world. Everyone's going to hate on you. Every other comedian is going to tell you suck. Whether you do or you don't, you have to just believe in yourself, like, hey, I can do it, and you keep doing it. And eventually, the practice shows, right? If you've worked on your craft enough, eventually it will show, and people watching you will realize, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. He's been doing it long enough.
Yeah. Very well said. Thank you for that. I wish you nothing but the best of luck in your future endeavors, and I'm looking forward to checking you out June 3rd.
Thank you very much for having us, and we'll see you all on June 3rd at the Vogue Theatre.